Before humanity does what humanity does, follow and like. Look, nobody starts their career thinking they'll end up as the guy mopping floors on an intergalactic peace station. But here's the thing about the universe. It has a sense of humor, and that sense of humor is mean. Danny Kowalski had been a maintenance technician, not a janitor, thank you very much, on Station Harmony 7 for exactly 4 years, 3 months, and 12 days. Not that he was counting. He definitely wasn't counting. The pay was decent, the work was mindless, and most importantly, nobody shot at him, which was a significant upgrade from his previous employment as a combat engineer in the Terran Colonial Marines. The station itself was a monument to bureaucratic optimism, a massive rotating donut in neutral space where the 14 species of the Galactic Coalition could meet, argue, and occasionally throw things at each other in a controlled environment. Danny's job was to clean up after the throwing. "You know what nobody tells you about alien diplomacy?" Danny said to his mop bucket, which had become his primary conversational partner. "It's messy. The Vrellans molt every 6 weeks. The Cathari literally sweat acid when they're nervous. And don't even get me started on whatever the hell the Zorgons excrete when they laugh." The mop bucket, as usual, had no comment. It was during his second shift on a Tuesday, or the station's equivalent, which they called second cycle, because apparently naming things logically was too much to ask, when everything went sideways. Danny was halfway through buffing the floor of Conference Hall 7 Delta when the emergency lockdown sirens started wailing. His first thought was, not again, because this happened about once a month when some ambassador got drunk and tried to fight someone else's ambassador. His second thought was that he'd just wax this floor, and if someone ruined it with combat boots, he was going to be pissed. The doors sealed with a pneumatic hiss, and Danny found himself trapped in the conference hall with approximately 30 aliens in formal diplomatic wear, all of whom immediately started screaming in their respective languages. "Great," Danny muttered, leaning on his mop. "This is exactly how I wanted to spend my evening." The screaming continued for a solid minute before someone thought to check the wall terminal. Ambassador Telvik, a Vrellian who resembled a 6-foot-tall iguana in a tailored suit, tapped his claws against the screen. "We are under attack," he announced, his translator device rendering his hissing into flat, emotionless English. "Hostile forces have breached the station." "Of course they have," Danny said to nobody in particular. The hostile forces in question turned out to be the Korvax, because the universe was apparently running out of creative ideas. The Korvax were the galaxy's designated warrior race, a species that bred, trained, and lived for combat. They were 7 feet tall, covered in bony plates, and had all the diplomatic skills of a brick through a window. And according to the increasingly panicked announcements over the station's PA system, a Korvax assault team had just seized the central command hub. "This is Station Commander Yilrath," crackled a voice that sounded like gravel in a garbage disposal. "All personnel are to shelter in place. The Korvax are demanding." The transmission cut off, replaced by a different voice. Deeper. Angrier. "Attention, Coalition weaklings. This station is now under the control of the Korvax supremacy. You have contaminated the galaxy long enough with your peace and your cooperation. We will show you the true way, the way of strength." "Oh, for fuck's sake," Danny said. One of the ambassadors, a Haltran with too many eyes and not enough sense, started wailing. "We're doomed. The Korvax Guard are trained from birth. They are the most elite warriors in known space." Yeah, Danny said, wringing out his mop. "I'm sure they're very impressive." Here's the thing about the Korvax Guard that nobody wanted to admit. They were excellent at fighting other Korvax. Their entire training regimen was based on centuries of combat tradition, honor duels, and ritual warfare. They knew 17 different ways to disarm a bladed weapon, and 32 distinct grappling techniques. What they didn't know was how to fight someone who didn't give a shit about honor, tradition, or fighting fair. The conference hall doors exploded inward, because of course they did, and 12 Korvax guards stormed in, their plasma rifles raised. They moved in perfect formation, their bony feet clanking against Danny's freshly waxed floor in synchronized intimidation. "Nobody move!" bellowed the lead guard, his translator making him sound like a movie villain who'd taken himself way too seriously. "You are now prisoners of the Korvax supremacy. Any resistance will be met with—" He never finished the sentence, because Danny hit him in the face with a mop bucket. The bucket, which was still full of dirty water, cleaning solution, and what Danny suspected was Zorgon secretions, caught the guard square in his open mouth. He went down hard, making a sound like a surprised trombone. The other 11 guards froze, their rifles tracking between the stunned ambassador and this insane human with a mop. "Huh," Danny said, looking at his now empty bucket. "That worked better than I expected." The second guard made the mistake of pointing his rifle directly at Danny, which meant Danny had a clear line of sight to the alien's four-fingered hands. Danny swung his mop. The handle was aluminum, reinforced to deal with station gravity fluctuations, and caught the rifle's barrel mid-swing. The weapon discharged into the ceiling, melting a decorative panel. "Oh, now you've done it," Danny said. "That's going to be paperwork." He yanked the mop sideways, leveraging the rifle out of the guard's grip. The alien stumbled forward, off balance, and Danny kicked him in the knee. The Korvax went down like a sack of rocks. "Two down," Danny announced to the room at large. The thing about the Korvax training was that it prepared them for honorable combat. They expected strikes from the front, defensive stances, tactical positioning. What they didn't expect was a pissed-off janitor who'd spent the last 4 years developing an intimate knowledge of every architectural quirk, maintenance shaft, and structural weakness in the station. Guard number 3 charged, roaring a battle cry that probably sounded intimidating in his native language. Danny grabbed a decorative plant, one of those tall ones the ambassadors kept insisting on, and threw it. Not at the guard. At the floor between them. The pot shattered. Dirt exploded across the waxed surface. The Korvax hit the dirt at full speed, his bony feet losing all traction on the slick floor. He went down in a flailing heap, crashed into 2 of his companions, and all 3 of them slid into the wall with a satisfying thunk. 5 down, Danny corrected. The remaining guards were starting to look uncertain, which was probably a first for them. One of them barked something in Korvax that the translator rendered as Formation Delta 9. They fanned out, trying to surround Danny. It was actually pretty impressive from a tactical standpoint. Too bad they'd forgotten about the ambassadors. Ambassador Telvik, to his credit, was the first to catch on. He grabbed a chair, one of those heavy ones made to accommodate multiple body types, and hurled it at the nearest guard. It hit with a deeply satisfying crunch. 6! Telvik shouted, his tail lashing with excitement. The Haltran stopped wailing and threw a datapad. It bounced off a guard's helmet with a bonk. 7. Danny, meanwhile, had grabbed his mop again, and was using it like a bow staff, which was definitely not covered in the station's maintenance manual, but probably should be. He jabbed one guard in what he assumed was a solar plexus, swept another's legs, and somehow ended up disarming a third by hooking the mop head around the alien's rifle strap and pulling. 10! Someone shouted. Danny had lost track of who. The last 2 guards looked at each other, looked at the pile of groaning comrades, looked at the suddenly militant ambassadors, and very sensibly dropped their weapons. "We surrender," one of them said in heavily accented standard. "Smart choice," Danny replied, leaning on his mop. He was breathing hard, but trying not to show it. "You guys want to sit in the corner while I call security?" They sat in the corner. The station's actual security forces arrived 20 minutes later, looking sheepish. Apparently the Korvax had used some kind of EMP weapon that had knocked out most of the automated systems and sealed the security teams in their barracks. Commander Yilrath, a Thessian with 4 arms and an impressive mustache on 2 of his faces, stared at the pile of disarmed guards in the conference hall. "Kowalski," he said slowly, "did you do this?" "In my defense," Danny said, "they broke my floor." "With a mop?" "And a bucket. Don't forget the bucket." "And a bucket." One of the guards groaned from the floor. Yilrath looked at him, then back at Danny. "Kowalski, you're a maintenance technician. I prefer janitor." Danny lied. "More honest. You're not trained for combat. I mean, I was in the Colonial Marines for 6 years, but sure, let's go with that. Yulrath's mustaches twitched in what might have been amusement. The Korvax Guard are trained from birth. They're supposed to be the finest warriors in the galaxy. Yeah, well, Danny said, surveying the groaning pile of elite soldiers. Turns out being good at ritual combat doesn't help much when some asshole with a mop doesn't play by your rules. The commander was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, a deep, booming sound that echoed through the hall. Humanity, he said, shaking all 4 of his heads. I will never understand your species. Join the club, Danny replied. We don't understand us either. The aftermath was predictably bureaucratic. The Korvax Supremacy issued an official apology, claiming the assault was the work of rogue elements, and definitely not a planned attack. The coalition accepted the apology because everyone was tired and nobody wanted to start a war over a failed hostage situation. Danny got a commendation, which came with a small bonus and a plaque he immediately stuffed in a closet. He also got interviewed by no fewer than 7 different news agencies, all of whom wanted to know how a simple janitor had defeated 12 elite warriors. I hit them with stuff, Danny explained every time. It's not that complicated. But it was complicated, in a way that most species didn't understand. The Korvax had trained for combat their entire lives. They'd studied tactics, strategy, weapon forms. They'd fought in controlled environments with rules and honor and tradition. Danny had mopped floors for 4 years and learned to improvise. The galaxy, it turned out, had a lot of species that were good at war. But humans? Humans were good at chaos. They were good at looking at a problem, ignoring all the established rules and asking, what if I just hit it with something? It wasn't honorable. It wasn't elegant. But it worked. 3 weeks later, Danny was back to his normal routine, buffing the floors of Conference Hall 7 Delta. The repair crews had finally fixed the ceiling panel, and the scorch marks were mostly gone. His mop bucket, as always, had no comment on current events. You know, Danny said conversationally, I've been thinking. Maybe I should ask for a raise. Or hazard pay. Definitely hazard pay. The bucket remained silent, which Danny took as agreement. He pushed it toward the next section of floor, whistling tunelessly. Somewhere in the station, diplomats were arguing about trade agreements. Somewhere else, the Korvax Guard were probably training even harder, determined to never be embarrassed again. And in Conference Hall 7 Delta, a janitor mopped the floor. Because someone had to keep things clean. And apparently, that someone was also pretty good at creative problem solving. The universe had a sense of humor. But so did Danny Kowalski. And his was meaner.